said that we'll be using Next.js for our application. So get started and installation. So for that, we'll just do npx this, and I like to use yarn. This is going to be more like this. So we're going to run this, and this is going to enable us to use yarn, and then ask the name of the project. So Kanban, just like we did yesterday, TypeScript, ESLint yes, Tailwind CSS no, src document directory yes, recommended yes. So we said, would you like to customize the default import alias? No. So the default hopefully is what I think it is. I will have said yes, but I think the default one is at /. So if it's not that, then we have to modify it ourselves and provide ourselves with that relative path. So we have two types of file path system, absolute versus relative paths. So a relative path describes the location of the file to the current working directory, and absolute path describes it from the root directory. So basically, if absolute path is just it's where you have something like at this / this, and then let me see just an example so that we understand what that is. So when you have all these dots, / they are all the relative paths. Then an absolute path would be more specific. So this is an absolute path. So you just put / this. There's no dot or any stuff. Then this dot here, once you start accessing the path, then that is the relative path. So that's the relative path. So we'll be using an absolute path because the purpose of an absolute path is that when you move folders around, you don't when you move files around, you don't have to update your import. Your import remains the same because it's an absolute path. Okay, so our project is set up, so all we have to do is cd Kanban, and then we open up this. So we have our path. So just to verify the absolute path, we go to tsconfig, and yes, we have the absolute path here, so we are fine. So we have the absolute path by default. Okay, so we also resolved that we'll be using a post CSS for Panda CSS, sorry, for our CSS integration to do our CSS. So we're using the Panda dev. So all I have to do is this, and then initiate the Panda dev. So to install that, I think I'm using yarn, so let me use yarn add d. So I don't have, the reason I don't use an npm is because when you use an npm, you end up with a package log.json. I already have a yarn log.json, a yarn log. So I don't want to have both package log and a yarn log. So if you're using yarn, you stick with yarn. If you're using npm, you stick with npm, so you don't have two files. It's not good for a project to have to have both a yarn log and a package log.json. That's not good. Okay, so and why is it not good? Because of the purpose of what the log files are for. The log files are to log down the version your app is using. And so if you use npm will not use yarn log. Npm will just check, is it a package log? No. So it's going to basically install new versions of the code, because in your package.json, so these have absolute installations, but most times you could have something like this, something like this, And so just like this, right, this one we just installed now, you can see it has this value here. So the version is not locked. So if the user, your team member does not have yarn and decide to use npm, it's going to look for the latest version, the latest non-breaking version, and it's going to install that rather than using this exact version you have. So your yarn lock will have maybe, let's say, 0.10, but the package json.log.json will now have maybe 0.12 point, maybe 2, something like that, a different version. So there will be a disparity in your version, and if there's any breaking change, automatically the breaking change will affect that user's code. Those using yarn will be fine because they have the yarn lock, but those using the npm will not be fine because their package lock is different. So it's good to just use one version, one package manager, so it's going to be easier for you to work, to manage your 5 versions. So for Next.js, back to our Panda CSS, all we have to do now is just to do Panda init. So we're going to do this. So Panda init, and so this is going to create our Panda files. It's going to create our Panda files, which includes the post CSS config, the Panda the Panda config itself, and then the style system. But the style system is outside here, but I don't want this. So we're going to regenerate this so that it's inside of our SROC. So our style system is not outside of our SROC. So we can also access it via our absolute paths. So for that, I'll add this script, the prepare. So the prepare script is to generate this style system each time you make changes and you need to generate it anew. So the style system is what this style system is what manages your CSS configurations for Panda CSS. Yeah. So I'll just make these changes. I think that's the last one we need to, okay, and this other one. So I'll make that changes. So we'll come to our Panda config. So usually this is looking for every file within our SROC and every file within pages. So this will work if we're using the old TypeScript. We're using the new TypeScript, and so SROC pages is not a path anymore. SROC is not different from pages. So what we have is going to be component, and we're going to have our app itself, right? SROC component and SROC app. So this is a better configuration for us. So then also we would have we want to move our style system into our SROC, so it's going to be SROC / our style system rather than just outside here. So we can delete this other one because we're going to generate a new one. We can delete that. Then also we need a configuration that we don't have. So the last time we checked that, we saw that to implement that we needed to use add something to our Panda config. I think that was JSS framework, and that's React. So we add the JSS framework, and that is React. So that is going to allow us to use styled. So we have in Panda CSS, let me just explain that again. In Panda CSS, we have 3 major ways of styling. We have the style functions, which uses the CSS and the style pattern, circle, and stacks. So basically, you can just call the function and use it in the class name, which is the standard way to do style CSS. Then we have the style prop. So the style prop are like from JSS. So we want to use this, like the box, the stack, or the circle. Those elements, we want to be able to use them. And then the style recipe, this is also like the style function but a custom function. So this badge can be used as a function inside of your class name, but you can also mix it up with the JSS and also create a component that you can reuse, that you can use in your app. So we will follow this pattern mostly within this application. Okay, so back to the configuration. So we have the prepare, and then we have done our config. So all we have to do is to call the generate again. So we're going to call yarn prepare. We call the script is called prepare from our package.json prepare. So we can call that to generate our style. So it generates it, and it generates it within SROC. So we have our style system now within SROC rather than outside where it was. Okay, so now we're done with the configuration. Then we have to change our within our SROC app, we have to change our global CSS. We have to reconfigure this. So we have to replace it with this. So Control A, and that should take care of that. So that's going to import our base token recipes and utilities functions to be used. Okay, then also we we already have this imported here. So in our layout, we already have global CSS imported here. So while we are here, I will just change the name of this. This is going to be Kanban Board, and so something like this. So this so I will explain layout again. So I think so we have in Next.js, let's go to the documentation before we finish up our styling. But we are actually done with the styling. But in Node.js, in Next.js, so for routing, we have different ways to route. So we have the app router method, and then we have the page system method. But they are all five system based router. So where the folder are used to define the route. So when you have something like app, dashboard, and settings, basically each of those concatenation, the app is the root, then we have a dashboard segment, which is dashboard, and then we have the settings, which is that. But for those to work, you have to create a special page called page.js or TSS, like in our own case. And that page.tss is going to be the main page, the entry point for that folder. So for app to work, we have app.page is going to be the root folder, and then for dashboard to work, it has to have page.js, which is going to be the dashboard folder. For settings to work inside of dashboard, it also have to have the page.css. So that's how we have dashboard/settings. But analytics does not have any page.js inside of it, so it's not going to render. So that is basically how that works. So in this example, the dashboard analytics URL is not a public accessible because it does not have page.js. So it can be used to store components, style sheets, or whatever. But we're not going to use that pattern. We'll basically build a folder called components, where all the components will be. So yeah, and then you just have to export the function, any function, name it anything, at the root as a default export for that page of CSS, and that's what will render on the page as the route. Okay, coming back here, I think we are done with this configuration. So all we have to do is just to empty up our initial page, which is this. So this is our home page. So we have to empty this up and just use what we have from Panda CSS. So, but before that, I also want to explain layouts. So the difference between a page and a layout. So a page is the view that you see. Then a layout is a UI that wraps pages, multiple pages. So let's say you have so we already explained the page slash and the dashboard slash. But let's say that we have for layout, let's say we have a dashboard and we have layouts, and then we have page.js and we have setting.js. This layout is going to wrap both the page.js and the setting.js. It's going to wrap the both of them. It's going to be available on both of them. On every children of dashboard would have that layout.js. So layout basically is something that is like a wrapper that wraps around every children of a particular page, of a particular section. So I think that's the best way to explain it. It's a UI that wraps around that. So let's say you have maybe you want to put an authentication system for those routes, and say, okay, from this page, from this area, you have to check if the user is authenticated. You can put the hook inside of that layout page, and it's going to check the user is authenticated, and if not, redirect the user maybe to sign up or sign in. You can do that from the layouts also. Okay, seeing that it's going to be used across board, across all your pages, so you can do that there. Okay, so going forward, so let's start our app, so at least we can see something. So yarn dev. So we'll run the app here, localhost 3000. Okay, so we said we're going to remove everything inside of here and just have a div, or let's say main. So inside this main we'll just have an h1, and the h1 we'll just call it the main page. Okay, so we have the main page. Okay, so we then want to have so we said we would want our board page to be something like this. So basically this is the main page, maybe a home page that we'll design later, but our board should be something like this, boards. So we should have this URL. So currently it's 404, so but we should have this URL existing where our page, our board page would be, where all the page designs will be done. So we'll create this page now. So to create it, all we have to do is to create a new folder or file, and then we'll just have boards, and inside of that board we'll now have page.tsx. so this now creates a folder. So we have a folder board, and then we have page.tsx within that. So that would be the page that we're looking for. So we have this here, but now okay, so it's saying that the page component it's not a React component, right? It's not a default export, it's not a React component. So we have to go into pages, and then we have to create export default function boards page, and then we can do a div. I can do a h1 at the moment and just call it boards. Yeah, so we have our page created. Okay, so now that we have gotten to this point, let's now go through what we want to actually build. Let's go to what we want to actually build. So so this is the Figma for what we want to build. So we have our start design system here, which we'll probably use as design tokens. So I think we'll do that first. So we have this design token. This is our colors, our primary colors, or whatever I want to call it. This is our typography, the font we'll be using, and then this is the buttons. So basically this is how we're going to build our buttons. The states of our button, the hover states, the drop down states. This is checkbox, and this is the dark versions of those buttons. I think they are the same thing. Okay, just for the idle, that's white. Yeah, so the rest are the same. And then we have our input. Our input will also style that. So then we have the body too, our text, heading XLMS. So we have all those. So that's what we're going to use within here. So we're going to set this up first before we now start building what we want to build. But before that, we look at here, we can see that we can see here that we have a sidebar, then we have a nav bar, and then we also have a body area or a viewing area which has the boards, which has all the boards. and the columns and the boards itself. So they're all here. And then we have it in dark mode and light mode, and then we have a few modals. So we're going to also build the modal component to manage the modal. And I think, yeah, then we have a pop-up, which is also a modal, but we could build it separately to just be a pop-up. And yeah, mostly that. And then we have also make sure that every component we create is responsive for both tablet and mobile. So let's get on that. So the first thing we're going to do is to create our tokens. So we want to create tokens. So okay, so the last time I also mentioned that I've not used this item before, so we'll basically be learning it for the first time together. So we need to set up a team. So a team. So to set up a team is going to be in Panda config. So this team is where we'll have our breakpoints. It's also where we'll have more like, okay, Panda already have these breakpoints. So we don't need to create a new breakpoint. We just need to set up our colors. So Panda already has this color. We'll just set up our own base colors here, like primary, secondary, and the rest inside of this define config. And then also set up some values, some spacing values, set them up, and some radiuses. Or we can just use this one. I think this is fine for radius, and then shadow. And okay, this is font sizes. Yes, so font sizes. Okay, so let's set up what we can set up now from our Kanban board. So coming over here, we'll start with the colors. So I believe this is our primary color. So Panda config team. Oh, it's already here. So Western colors. Did I get it wrong? Okay, tokens, then colors. Tokens, then colors. So in color, we're going to have primary. And primary is going to be oh, something like this. Okay. So the next one is going to be secondary. So now we cannot use these keys in our style. This is font size. The font size is here. So it's going to be H XL, and the XL is going to be 24. Then we'll have HL. HL is going to be 18. Then we'll have HM, which is 615. Then we have HS, which is I think I should start this with small letters. HS52. Then we'll have BL and BM. BL is 13, and then BM is 12. So you see that most of the things we are doing is to set up what we would need for ourselves, what we'll be needing. I think I'll have to go to dev mode. Yeah, so this is heading M. This is heading M. Yeah. So this is heading M, and this is normal, which is medium, body large, BL. So yeah, so they use different stuff. Okay, so let's build out the. So now that we have the our design system ready, I will just do a prepare once more, and then I'm going to start building out our component. So now that we have that, come over to boards. Okay, outside of app, over here we'll build a new component, a new folder called components. So inside our components, we'll build our first component. It's going to be called button. So we use button.css. They're also going to use the index import. And the reason we want to use the index import is so that to export everything, is so that when we want to import it, we would not have to start accessing /button from our component. We just call /component and to give us the button. This should be inside of index, not inside of button.tx. Then from button.tx, we're going to export. We're not going to export default, we'll just export named export button, and then it's going to be equals to something. Okay, so now I want to start building out this. Build out this button. Differences in export. So I'm going to explain with this component once we create it, and on how exports can be done. Okay. So let's import it somewhere so that we can see how the export goes. So going to have from the app, from the boards, let's test it here. So I'm going to have button. So first of all, you see that we have button here. You can see it happens. Ignore this for now. So we have import button, and it came like this from this component. So this is a named export, right? We can also do this. We can also do /button, and it will work. We still have this button here, named here. This is called named export. You import it by the name. So even if you want to change the name, you have to do something like button as bt, maybe bt. So bt becomes the new name, and then you can use bt here, right? So this is how you change the name of a named export. So the other name export we have is called default export, which is what we already used here, but you won't see how it works here because this is used by Next.js directly. So let's go to the button component. I will use it there. So let's say I did a default export here. So for that, I will have to remove this first of all. Then I'm going to now say export default button. So this is named a default export now. And the question is, why didn't I do export default const? This does not work. The only way this will work is if you're using a function. So let's say you're using a function like this. So then you cannot do a named export like this without. So you can do it like this: name default function button. But if you're using a const, you can't define the default directly. So you have to. Maybe later on I will explain why you do this. So you just do export default the button, and this becomes a default export, or the other way around with a function or a class. So for class, you also do export default class. You can do it directly, and then the class name. yeah, so you can do that directly. So if I remove this, this should work. So you can do this for class. You can also do this for function. Default export default function, right? So this is a default export, and then this is a named export. If I do export const, this is named export. If I remove this default here, this is also a named export. The name of this export will be this. Also for classes, if I remove this, this becomes a named export. The name of the export becomes whatever the name of this is. So that's named export. So named export, that when you import it, it's going to use that name generated. But for a default export, it means that the whole file itself is that item. That item is the whole file. It doesn't contain any other thing again. That is the assumption. So which means that if I come to index, this is not going to work, because when you do export star this, what this is going to export is going to be funny. Now let's look at this. Because if I did this already from button, and button is doing a default export, what is actually doing at this default? So let's see. If I come to pages, you can see I don't have button here, right? But I can do this. I can do default. There's a default here, right? But you're not actually allowed to use this. So there's a default here. So which means that I can just do, so if I'm importing directly from button, I can do button like this. Right, so this is the same thing. This is correct. This is a default export. So you don't need to do the curly braces, no named export. But this also means I can just give it any name I want. Any name I want is fine, and it should work the same way with no issues. It's not a named export. Named export means it's already had a name. But a default export means that you can give it a name when you are importing it, and it imports the whole file. So there's no curly braces to import children, to import its children. It's just on its own, right? There's no curly braces. So that's the major difference between the two of them. And which should you use is still your preferences. If you want to, if you're building a component, a file that which we will do like utility files that export multiple functions, named export will be better. If you're doing a component, because the fact I want to use this kind of export, because with this default export, if I come over here now, I can't do button, and I can't also do button like this. You see, it's not working, and I can't. Can I do this? I'm not allowed to use this, right? This is not even available. So it means that that export is not going to work. I think if I do this, I think I can do this dot. Can I? I don't think so. Okay. Export this does not re-export as default, a default. So you see it, the error shows here. So export star does not re-export a default. So which means that if I want to export button here, just like we wanted here, let's say I want to still do this. By exporting the button as default, what I'll have to now do is come over here. I'm going to export, I think I can do this. No, I'll have to do this. I have to import, sorry. I have to import the button first of all. Then I have a giant export to export everything I've imported. So I can import another guy here, maybe button 1, and then button 1 will now be going over here. Alright, so we now have button 1 and button inside of here. But I have to do large imports of everything here, which is more like I'm doing 2 lines for everything. So but I'll do this and I'll do this, which is why the star export is much more preferable, because you can just export the named export within it at once. Even though it's one file that is there, it exports everything at once. So that way, if you still come back to page with what we have now, the button works. Now you also have button 1. You can see button 1 is here too. So, and they're basically the same export. Okay, so I believe that should have explained that. So we go to the next, we go back to what we were doing before, which is to export our components as named exports, as this export. So I'll remove all this. So that means I can go back to doing export star from button, and this should work, and our page should have what it needs back, which is this. Okay, so this is saying that our component is not a JSS because we are returning void. To fix that, all we have to do is return something, even if it's null, and that should fix that. We are returning something now. And if you go to the UI, you basically see nothing. So you can see nothing is here. So we'll say const button recipe. So this recipe, it's nothing special, so it doesn't confuse. This button recipe is basically a mixture, a configuration for the CSS styling, so we don't have to do it again. Okay, that's what this is basically is. We don't have to do it again. It does it for us. We do it once and then reuse it over and over again. So it's the same styling as a style component. If I used style component before, and it's also the same thing as styling with CSS, but now in a more neat way and more reusable way. Okay, so we have this button here, and then our export const button will now be styled from GSS, which is just button, and then take this button CVV to style that button. So it's going to take the button, this button component from so if you look at here, it takes a component. The component is the component from normal Java HTML. So we are using the button element in HTML, and then we're going to apply all these styles here to that button element. That's simply what we're doing here. So that way, just by using the default one, when we come back here, we should be able to see something. Nothing is there. The variant is this. So for the base, at this we should have color as black. Okay, we have to also pass a label. Okay, we have to pass a child button. Let's say click me. So now we have that click me. So this is the click me button. So let's finish up this styling by coming over here and styling the first button. So the first button we have, I think it just has a minimum width of 255, which I could also be wrong because the width of this is 164. So last time we decided that we'll use padding for the width to ascertain the width of the text from the parent. Then we can also give it a minimum width of 164, and then make sure it has a padding of at least 24 and 14 up and down. Alright, so to do that, we would come back to the button component, and so we would have padding X is going to be, so this 4 could mean, let's see, in their style props tokens,